session on youth and policy making and advocating to tackle climate change. You're welcome to take your seats as we are starting in just 1 minute. Thank you, everyone. Please have your seats. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning to everybody here joining us in Los Angeles. And good afternoon, good evening to all of those joining us online from all over the world. My name is Emma Sherbine, and I will be the moderator for this session. And I am so excited and so honored to introduce to all of you our wonderful speaker, Nalleli Cobo. She is the Goldman Environmental Prize winner for the year of 2022. She led a coalition to permanently shut down a toxic oil drilling site in her community in March of 2020 at the age of 19, an oil site that caused serious health issues for her and for others. Her continued organizing against urban oil extraction has now yielded major policy movement within both the Los Angeles City Council and Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, which voted unanimously to ban new oil exploration and phase out of existing sites. I am just so honored because we have sitting in this chair right here with all of you a hero of which we are going to learn so much more from, and perhaps take the lessons from her work, her advocacy, and her initiatives so that we can also create positive environmental change in our own respective communities. And this is especially powerful because in the context of IYC, we have people who are joining us from online all over the world. So we're hoping that her local work here will inspire and galvanize people at the global level. So please join me in giving a warm welcome and round of applause for Nalleli Cobo. Wow. So I gave just this incredible brief biography about Nalleli, but I would love for you, from your personal standpoint, and also would love for you to share more about your identity, especially since we are in this international youth context. Could you please just share more about what initially motivated you to start your activism against these oil extraction sites at such a young age?
Hi, everyone. So I grew up 30 feet from an active oil and gas well here in South Los Angeles. My community is right in the middle of Staples Center and USC. We're like the good part of the sandwich. And I didn't wake up one day and decide to become an activist. My activism was really born out of survival. And I became an activist at the age of 9 without even learning the word activist until I was 11. And I learned it because a reporter had asked me, "How do you feel being an activist?" And I had to ask her to pause the recording and explain that fancy new term she had just thrown at me. And I learned that my community was made up of activists. It was us fighting day to day for our basic human rights of breathing clean air in our community. It was us fighting day to day to open the windows in our own homes because that's something we weren't allowed to do. Growing up next to an oil and gas well, everything changes. It's not your normal neighbor that wakes up at 5 in the morning to mow their lawn or has the dog barking until 3 in the morning. It's a toxic silent killer that's threatening your health and your safety and the environment every day of your life. And in my personal experience, I got really sick, and it started with a nosebleed. My nosebleeds got so intense I could no longer sleep in my own bed. I would sleep in a chair to prevent choking on my own blood at night. I developed body spasms so intense my mom would have to carry me from one place to the other. Heart palpitations, and I used a heart monitor for several weeks. Headaches, stomach pains. I developed asthma. That's something I'm always going to have to live with now. And at the age of 19, I was diagnosed with stage 2 reproductive cancer. And I was forced to choose between my reproductive system and my life. And I fight every day so that decision ends with me, because no 19-year-old should be faced with that decision. But at the end of the day, no human should be faced with that decision. And that's the reality so many frontline activists face here in Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is the largest urban oil field in the nation, but we aren't aware of that.
Wow, that is so powerful. And thank you so much for your work, because truly no 19-year-old should have to make that decision. And we really appreciate you using your voice and your work to advocate, so that doesn't have to be a continuous trend. But and I'm so sorry, but I hope that it does end with you and it doesn't have to continue on for other 19-year-old women. And what are some of, excuse me, the biggest challenges that you faced while leading this coalition to shut down the toxic oil drilling site? And also, just you were so intimately sharing these very serious health issues where you had difficulties with sleeping and also had difficulties with your heart and even being diagnosed with cancer. But how were you able to just rally this coalition and overcome all of these challenges?
It was a lot of challenges, definitely, because we were fighting one of the biggest corporations in the world, the oil industry. But we were also fighting what I call three monsters. We were fighting the oil industry. We were fighting the broken regulatory system people of color constantly fight. And we were fighting the archdiocese without attacking the faith, because the oil well in my community operates on land that is leased to them by the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Just because it's on land owned by the Archdiocese, it doesn't make it holy emissions. And it is, unfortunately, another way that the church is abusing children. And we have to hold them accountable for that. I faced a lot of adversities also because of my age. I was often told, little girl or sweetheart, you should be in school or leave this to the grown-ups. And my response always was, you're right, I should be in school, but you're not doing your job at defending me and my community or guaranteeing us a future that I have to be here. And they'd be like so quiet and be like, you're actually next to speak, so you can head up now. But it's the urgency that we act with because our lives are on the line. We live in what are called sacrifice zones. It's a name for it. And that's what they view us as invisible, as disposable, as silent. But we told them and showed them that they picked the wrong community and that we deserve the right to breathe clean air, that we're stronger than that, and that we will fight that, because no, everyone should be able to open the windows in their home. Everyone should be able to breathe clean air despite their age, their gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, or zip code. Clean air is a basic human right that's being denied to us.
Absolutely. And we appreciate the work that you and these other youth activists are doing. But first and foremost, as you said, you should be in school. This shouldn't have to be your duty to rally these officials and these big oil corporations into doing the right thing. We all have the right to clean air. And another thing too is that this is sacred Tongva and Chumash land that we find ourselves upon. And so there shouldn't be sacrifice zones. We should not be paying at the expense of our youth and our marginalized and vulnerable indigenous BIPOC populations. We should be advocating for them. We should be speaking for them. And your story is so powerful, but how, as a young leader, because again, there was so much bias and people were even saying things to you, oh, you should be in school. How then did you manage to gain the trust and support of your community and these officials in order to create change?
It became a common conversation starter for our parents to stop each other in the streets and say, "Hey, my daughter had an asthma attack. How's your son's asthma?" Or, "My daughter's in the ER. Can you help me pick up my other kids from school?" That was the way they would greet each other. And that's heartbreaking. They should have been saying, "My child is going to the International Youth Conference and we're going with them," you know? Like, that wasn't what our community was being handed. And we were fighting for our right to breathe clean air. We were fighting for our homes. We were fighting for the people that we loved, for our health, for our safety. There was never a question as to why would you not fight? Like, no one ever believes me, but I was extremely shy. Like, I would not talk to my own shadow growing up. But it was my activism and that brought me out of that, and the love that I have for my community that pushed me to start making that noise, because I saw how my community, who would work 12 to 16-hour days, would still be willing to go door to door knocking after that job. How could I not go door knocking with them when I had the steady schedule of getting out at 3 p.m.? How I would see that they would team up, one person a Spanish speaker and the other an English speaker, so they could really answer any and all questions. How could I not when I could speak both languages? It was never a question of why should I fight or should I do this? It was, why are we not all doing this? And I never, again, didn't wake up and decide this is the day. It was, Mom, this is really going on. What can we do? And I honestly remember being happy when I found out that it was only unleashed by the Archdiocese, because I went to a Catholic school my entire life, first grade through senior year of high school. And it was because of that that I was like, oh, they just don't know that this is going on. Like, this is going to be over tomorrow. And it was a very rude and harsh awakening to find out that the church knew and was sort of washing their hands of that situation. So, because of the morals and beliefs that they have instilled in me, I do feel like it's my job to call them out on being hypocrites in that aspect. But sorry, tangent, but the urgency that we act with is the urgency that we invite you all to act with. Because this may not be going on in your communities today, but it can be going on in a few years. And I think of like this graphic that went viral a few years ago that said, the first square said, "Stand up for me, my religion is being attacked. That's not my religion." The next square said, "Stand up for me, my gender is being attacked. That's not my gender. Stand up for me, my community is being attacked. I don't live in that community." And the last square, the person said, "I didn't stand up for anyone, and now I'm being attacked and there's no one to stand up for me." So are you going to raise your fist in the air and demand an end to environmental racism and environmental justice, or are you going to wait until it's your life on the line?
Absolutely, that is very well said. Because what we're looking at is, it's no longer a matter about climate change. It's a climate crisis. It is happening, and now what we're looking at is what can we all do to prevent it from continuing to spread and to continue to manifest into this horrific tragedy. What we're looking at, exactly what you were saying, and thank you so much for sharing, is because by the year 2050, we're looking at over 200 million people who are going to be climate crisis migrants, especially in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. They're going to be without a home. We're looking at sea levels rising. We're seeing these floods like we are seeing in Brazil, earthquakes. All of these things they're manifesting. So just like you said, we need to stand up now, because we all call this place Mother Earth our home. And another thing that is coming to mind as we're discussing this, and you're sharing your story and how it just began with using what you had, speaking up, knowing that you had ability to speak multiple languages and using that ability to use languages to help with translation, to help with advocacy. A lot of youth want to help, but they feel they're not qualified, or they feel like they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the education, they don't know how policy works, they would feel intimidated to get into these spaces and to make policy change or to hold these corporations accountable. So, just as a way to kind of guide youth who are here, and again, this is a workshop because we want to give you all work and a place to start and things to put into action your ideas. How could you kindly walk us through? Let's say somebody wanted to make policy change or they wanted to hold these corporations accountable. Can you walk us through that framework or how someone could get started or what they can do or examples of your policy changes and initiatives?
First thing is that activism is different for everyone. And finding your piece and your part within your activism, I think, is very important and will always keep like that fire in your belly going and will keep you going. Knowing your why you fight, because it always goes back to why you're doing this. And for me, my why is my community. Knowing that education is also the first step. We can't create change if we don't know what's wrong or have an idea of how to create a better solution. I'm going through all the things in my head, sorry. I'm very aware that urban oil extraction is an odd cup of tea, but it was my upbringing that showed me my passion in life from a very early age. But it doesn't only have to be urban oil extraction. Like if you are passionate about the ocean, we need so many people talking about sea level rise and our marine animals. We need people talking about animal agriculture on land. We need people talking about sustainable designers and upcycling clothes and not creating clothes and using raw and old materials that we have, finding your piece and running with it, because everything does go back to fighting for our earth. Knowing within policy that it takes time and being persistent, and again being true to yourself and knowing why you fight, because that's going to keep you going when you hit a wall or something. Within our community, it took us 4 years of advocating in what felt like silence before we captured any sort of media attention. It took us 10 years to get the oil well in my community permanently shut down, 4 years to get it temporarily, and then the remaining 6 to really make sure that that would never reopen again. Knowing that your story is enough. I'm always very honest that I don't know all the legal terms, I don't know all the scientific terms, but I know my story. And that's what I'm always going to share truthfully and unapologetically. And no one can tell you your story is not valid. Your story is not enough, because your story is what got you here in the first place. And your story is what's going to keep you going. I believe storytelling is a very compelling form of activism that goes unnoticed oftentimes. And finding your passion, your strength, and finding a way to turn it back into advocating for our earth. Never did I imagine at like 9 years old or even younger that I would be an activist or that I would be here or that I would be a storyteller. But my mom, when I was younger, I was like in 3rd grade, and I started to get a little overwhelmed with all the grown-ups. You guys were not adults, you guys were grown-ups that were telling me I shouldn't be in this space. And I was like, "Mom, maybe they're right. Maybe you're right. I don't know everything. It is really confusing to be in those spaces." And she told me, "When you started 1st grade, could you add 10 plus 10?" And I said, "No." And she said, "By the end of your 1st grade year, could you add 10 plus 10?" And I was like, "Mom, at the end of 1st grade, I could add 20 plus 20." And she says, "This is exactly what this is. You're starting. You don't have to have all of your pieces yet. As you go, you're going to gain knowledge. And as you go, you're going to become stronger and wiser and collect more pieces for you to put out into the world." And I've never forgotten that. And I've never let myself not continue because I feel overwhelmed in a space, because I feel that imposter syndrome in a new room. If anything, I find a way to channel that and push me further into my work, so I don't feel that imposter syndrome in that room. So there's more people that look like me in my community in that room, and finding ways to create policy changes in that, so we are the last people that have to fight to create and Oh my gosh. So we are the last generation that has to fight for these climate policies, because it's not okay that we have to advocate for this in 2024. You would think it would be, it's basic.
Absolutely. And I love how you opened up with the idea that activism is different for everyone. Um, and I really appreciate that, because as we're having this conversation, the initiatives and things that you took to create policy change for oil, or specifically urban oil extraction, is not going to be the same as if you're looking at the issues of fast fashion, ocean pollution, looking at clean air, e-waste, a number of issues. So for you to give everyone a one size fits all approach may not work for everyone. And that is why I really, again, appreciate that we all have to find our own voices, our own why, and how to be an activist. And for you, it was for your community. And again, just to reiterate, it took you 4 years of this advocacy, and it took 10 years to finally get that oil well shut down. And talking about imposter syndrome, a lot of young people, again, feel they don't have what it takes or the knowledge to get started. But you're sharing your story, how even as a child, just by speaking to people in your community, and how that movement grew and garnered national attention. And I'm so sorry, I must mention that you've even been featured in Vogue, and that just started by rallying with your community. So really, just to drive home, starting at the local level matters. That's how it grows to this global level. And again, even with this imposter syndrome and these challenges you were facing, I must mention that you had unanimous votes from the Los Angeles City Council and the County Board of Supervisors to ban new oil extraction. So how do you believe that you were able to be successful with that? Because again, this is a very lucrative, profitable industry where a lot of people, and especially we know in politics, there are lobbyists, there's a lot of people who are undercover corrupt. How were you able to rally and get that support to gain and garner these unanimous votes for this landmark decision?
It was definitely a historic decision because, as I mentioned earlier, Los Angeles is the largest urban oil field in the nation. So when this phase out is complete in 20 years, we will be able to say Los Angeles was the largest urban oil fields in the nation. And that simple change saves so many lives. And that allows a 9-year-old to go outside and play. That allows, and my grandma was diagnosed with asthma at 70 and had to learn how to use an inhaler in a second language. That was very difficult for her. I know that that will not be the case anymore. I know that I will not. The decision with me having to choose my life and my reproductive system will end with me. And 20 years is a very long time for a phase out, and I am trying to get it down, but it's still historic change that we were able to accomplish, and that started with an invisible, historically viewed as silent, disposable, invisible community. And we said we are anything but that. We created historic policy change in the city of Los Angeles. And that is something that someone on this panel mentioned earlier, that there's no stronger power than people power. And that's exactly what we demonstrated then and there, that we were enough, that we were strong enough, and that we were going to hold them accountable, because at the end of the day, our elected officials work for us. And we have to remind them of that, that their job, that we put them in those seats, that we can get them out, but that their job is to be our voice at that seat, to represent our communities, not a corporation, not to make profit, but to be the voice of the community. It was definitely not an overnight decision. It was very, very long and hard work, but we did it, and remaining true to why we were fighting, remaining true as to why we were there in the first place, and we were fighting with truth. And I'm a woman of faith and respecting all beliefs. And I always thought back to the story of David and Goliath. I know how that story ends, and I'm very proud and honored to stand with my community as David in this fight because, well, we all know how that story ends, and that's exactly how this fight is going to end.
Wow, that is so powerful and beautifully said. And I also really love how you said that you are a woman of faith, and even the challenge of, again, holding the archdiocese accountable, because that is a value of yours that is so strong. And yet you were able to call them out, and rightfully so, to hold them accountable. Because again, this is part of your value. But it can be very difficult for a lot of people. So if you may, could you elaborate on that for us? Because there are people where it's very difficult because of their faith, their culture. They may come from countries that are very censored, and there are a lot of corrupt officials where there's a lot of fear in rising against these values. So in talking about this, I guess you would say, like, um, kind of like contrast, if you will. Can you elaborate more on how you had the courage to stand up and be true to your values, your real values in this advocacy?
To start off, no one should do anything that will put them in personal danger or risk their life in that way unless everyone's different. So saying that, but for me, it was I just remember being in class and how they would read us stories about God and how they would tell us to protect God's creation, to follow the golden rule, to stand up for one another, stand up for your community. They gave us little bracelets with the WWJD, what would Jesus do? And like, always stop yourself and ask. And in my head, I was like, well, I don't think Jesus would choose profit over people's health, let alone the people that serve that church. I remember being in mass once a week because it was a Catholic school, and they would always tell us, we're going to mass, make sure your inhaler's in your pocket. We're going to mass, make sure if you feel uneasy, you sit in the back with your teacher so we can be aware. I couldn't stay silent. And I would often be in the principal's office because I would get in trouble for um, speaking out against the archdiocese on land that was owned by the archdiocese, because we would be playing kickball or foursquare, and the teachers or my friends would be like, "What's that smell? It smells really weird. When drilling for oil, it smells like rotten eggs." But something that oil well in my community would do is add even more chemicals to mask the smell. So then my community would smell like guava or cherries, chocolate, citrus. And when they would say it smells really weird, I would be like, "Oh, this is my cue." And I'd be like, we're so far from an active oil and gas well that produces an average of 60 to 80 barrels of crude oil a day. They have 21 underground wells, and I would just go on and like dump this information, and my teachers would be like, "First of all, you don't talk, so what's going on right now?" But I would then be pulled into the principal's office because I wasn't allowed to do that. But my response was always, "Well, I will see you here again tomorrow, sister," because she was a nun, so I had to call her sister. Sorry. Um, I could not make noise or defend my community in that aspect, and any opportunity I had to inform just one person was enough, because that's how the ripple starts. You poke the water once. That's how the domino effect starts. You push one domino and 10 will follow, or 100 will follow. And I knew that I was fighting with my truth, and my heart and my faith was telling me that I had to hold them accountable and make noise in that aspect, and I wasn't going to not do that. But again, it's different everywhere in the world, and I was very fortunate and privileged that I was able to stand up in that aspect. And then I completely understand not everyone is able to, and we have to give everyone grace and respect for where they are and what they are able to do at that time for their safety and their well-being as well.
I love that, especially grace. I think is a very beautiful word. For me, grace means to give love regardless of whether you believe someone deserves it or not. And we need to meet people where they are. People are coming in at many different spaces, and they may have different levels of education and awareness, but meeting them where they are and guiding them for this movement is so essential. And again, I love how you said, I'll see you tomorrow, sister, knowing that you didn't just speak up once, that it was a continuous effort and a continuous movement. And wow, just so many wonderful things that you shared, really to help galvanize the youth with their respective movements for the climate. And I would like, for closing, before I open it up to the audience, and I haven't had a chance to really check for what's happening online and what questions or comments they have. But before I open up to the audience, in reflection of this year, the year of 2024, where so much is at stake, especially our planet, what would you say to the youth who, I must mention, unfortunately, statistics show that less than 50% of youth ages 18 to 29 believe that they will go to vote this year? What would you have to say to really inspire the youth and really drive home the message of why voting and getting involved matters for this year especially?
Two major things. One is your vote and your voice do matter, and your vote does count. It makes a huge difference. We do need you to use your voice in that way. This is a way that we demonstrate our power. This is the way we demonstrate our united power. This is the way that we are able to elect officials that will be the voice for us at those spaces. This is a time where so much, and I mean so much, is on the line, that this ballot is truly one of the biggest, if, like, I don't know, I always say that at every voting year because I thought 2020 was going to be the biggest, but now I think this one's also really big, guys. Knowing that this is truly that moment in history or in that documentary where you look back and you tell your kids, your grandkids, I was at that march. I boycotted that brand. I voted for that person, or I voted against that person. What are you going to tell them when you look back at this documentary? Are you going to be on the right side of history, or are you going to be quiet and too shy to be even say that, oh, I didn't do that. So what do you want for dinner, guys? We don't want that. We have to use the power that we were given. We have to use the love that we have for our community and demonstrate that they are not going to mess with us, that we are not silenced or disposable, but we are real people with real lives. We have real stories to tell. Like, I'm just like any other 23-year-old. I love music and makeup and dancing and Justin Bieber. I loved dancing. I was a professional dancer for 10 years. There's so much of my life that it's not just activism. And we have to remember that for so many others. Raise your hand if you are registered to vote in California. All right. Raise your hand if you know others that are registered to vote in California. Yeah. All right. So everyone that raised your hand, I'm going to give you homework. Sorry. SB 1137 is currently under attack. SB 1137 was signed and implemented into law 2 years ago by Governor Newsom. This is a historic and monumental law that would create a new buffer zone between new oil extraction and sensitive land, a 3,200-foot health and safety buffer zone that we don't have, which is pretty basic if you ask me. For 15 years of my activism, I've always asked people one question. What do you think belongs in a community? What do you think belongs in a community? Parks, go. Schools. Come on, guys.
Don't be shy.
I'm on a time limit. Come on.
What do we have? Parks.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Hospitals.
Hospitals.
Notice how nobody said an oil well. The reality is that 18 million Americans live a mile or less to an active oil and gas well. So let's create history and demonstrate to the big oil that they do not have a place in our backyards, in our democracy, or in our future. The week this law, SB 1137, was signed into law, it was attacked by the oil industry. They spent $20 million on a referendum that is now on this ballot this November. They are willing to spend $200 million on this campaign. I don't have anywhere near that kind of money, but I know what we do have, and that is people power. We have our power to show up at that ballot and say, you tried and you lost. You picked the wrong community. You picked the wrong people, because we deserve our stories to tell and we deserve to open our windows and our homes. So when voting this November, we will be voting to keep SB 1137 into law for our health and our safety. I say safety because many people don't know that active oil and gas wells operate under such immense pressure that every 10 to 15 minutes, valves have to be manually opened to prevent an explosion. So we're living next to a bomb. And I was 10 years old when I learned that. And the way I could comprehend it was that I was popcorn. And whenever you're a few seconds too late to your microwave, your popcorn gets burnt. And I remember being in school and checking the clock every 10 to 15 minutes and whispering to myself, I hope they open the valves. That's not a normal reality that we should be living. And that's the reality that over approximately 2.7 million Californians have right now today. So let's create that history and let's create a buffer zone so that is not the reality and kids only learn about urban oil extraction in history books. That kids look outside of their windows and they see trees and not an oil rig. Let's vote so we can tell our kids or our grandkids in that documentary, I voted to keep that law. If we were to lose, which is not going to happen because we will all vote to keep SB 1137, it means that Texas would have stronger environmental laws than California too. And that says a lot. So let's create history. Let's hold the big oil accountable and say enough is enough, because we should not be prioritizing profit over people's public health or people's safety and our environment.
Absolutely. So you all heard your homework. If you are registered to vote in California, you must vote to keep SB 1137. If you are not a resident of California or you are coming from another country, please make friends with someone from California. Make lots of friends, because we happen to be here in California, and you are going to ask them to keep SB 1137, because you absolutely said it best, Nalleli. How are you going to be remembered in history? Are you going to be remembered as the person that was silent? Or are you going to be remembered as the person who used their voice, who galvanized others so that people don't have to sacrifice their ability to open a window or their reproductive system or to battle cancer? So I think that is the best thing that we can do, is to take meaningful action, and we can start that today. And so I would also like to open this up for our audience. And I also want to keep in mind that I invite you all, it's a workshop. So of course, if you have questions for our wonderful speaker, Nalleli, about her endeavors and her challenges and her advocacy, please do. However, if you are also an activist or you are also working on different environmental initiatives and you would like to open up the floor to ask for advice or how you can continue to galvanize yourself, please do so. The floor is yours. So at this time, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question so we can bring the mic to you. And I will also be doing my best to check with our online attendees what their thoughts are. All right, I like it. Don't be shy. Okay, so first question.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. My name is Yuma. I'm from the same school as Emma, Soka University of America. Thank you so much for today's, discussion and really sharing your powerful experience with us. I had a question about like everything you were saying about, but obviously you emphasize like the importance of really advocating for, climate change and not just like your generic things that you think about when you think about like climate change, like for example, sea levels rising, but also some like really like things that people don't really think about. For example, like your experience with like oil industries and stuff like that. But I feel like, for a lot of people who struggle like economically, for example, right? Like it's, it's sometimes like they don't even have like the time to think about like their climate and stuff, right? Like if you're struggling to put like food on a table or have like a roof over your head, you're not really worried about, the oil rig that's next to you or like the ocean sea levels rising. But how do you kind of create that importance for even those kind of people, because in the long term, right, maybe it's not like, sorry, in the short term, it's not anything significant right now, but in the long term, it's definitely going to have like huge effects on everyone's lives. And so how do you really create that importance and specifically for people who can't really have the time to think about, the importance of climate change in the long term?
That's a great question. And for us in my community, it was, I grew up in an affordable housing building. I'm a very proud daughter of 2 immigrants. My mom came here from Mexico and my dad from Colombia, but I'm also the very proud daughter and proud product of a single mother. So my mom would work 2 to 3 jobs to be able to provide food for us. So I have 3 older siblings. I lived very, very fortunate to grow up in a 5-generation household. We had my great grandmother until she was 104. So it was always a very hectic household too. To answer your question, we saw how we were being impacted. We saw how my mom was diagnosed with asthma at 40, which is unheard of, but my grandma got it at 70. We saw how the nosebleeds that we didn't think anything of were now keeping us up at night. We saw how other kids in the community would start missing out on school because they had other symptoms as well. Like you said, it was maybe for some people, it wasn't impacting short term, but long term, the impacts were there. And within my community, it was very difficult, and not everyone was able to go knocking door to door every day, wasn't able to go to every town hall meeting because of their jobs, because they had to provide. But that's why community organizing is so powerful and so effective, because we did it as a community. I remember one day there was a community member that we wanted to organize to go to a town hall meeting. And she said, "This is my first day off in 2 weeks. I really have to catch up on my housework. I have to do laundry. I don't think I can go testify." I will never forget this. What she did instead to help her community was that she turned her home into like a little daycare center for all of us kids to be babysat while the other parents went to testify. That we left her house on her cleaning day probably way worse than we did going in, but we found ways to support one another and meet each other where we were. And I think that's something that's so powerful, and that is the power of community organizing and grassroots organizing, because you come together and you stand up for one another, and you lean on each other for support when the other one can't stand. But it's also giving yourself grace and allowing when you can and when you can't, because everyone, oh my gosh, I keep stuttering so bad, I'm sorry. Everyone has different situations, and we have to meet each other where we are and support one another when we can and how we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And it is, again, as you said, how we can all support one another where we may be. I have another question here, so please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sherrod. I'm from Chicago. I flew in to support this conference. One of the things that I think that IOIC does is being able to put this information out, and then people all over the world can look at it. And we talk about support and how we can get this message. There's a wealth of knowledge that has been shared from yesterday and today, and I'm pretty sure tomorrow as well, and Sunday. My biggest question is, how are you disseminating that information out to cities that are not as connected as where you're leading these conferences? So you're in New York, you're here this year as well. Chicago is a big city too. Having these intellectual conversations on that level, even looking at mini satellite, I would say, areas where you can get a leader from each group that could then bring this, so that this conference can also have representation also from the cities in the different countries. What would be your suggestion of mass getting this out after today, because I've already took notes yesterday and put it on Facebook and shared what I can with people that cannot afford to come here. But I want to know, because I listened to her say earlier today, traveling is one of the things that we talked about yesterday, resources and food. We know where youth are at. So how could we better, after this conference, be able to disseminate this information so it is affordable for groups? Not only that, but to lead, even if it has to be from someone like me bringing forth of information.
That is an amazing question. And I think that's a question that can also be like an entire conference, because it's so deep and intricate. I think word of mouth goes overlooked a lot. And I say that because I remember a lot more conversations I had with my best friends and some of the things I read online. And having conversations in different spaces that you may not even be talking about this is where we need to start implementing those conversations. I remember I used to be so afraid to talk about like my activism with my best friends, and now like I feel so comfortable doing it. Posting on social media is something that is very powerful. You can share with anywhere in the world in a matter of seconds. And even if you have one follower, that one person now knows information that they didn't 10 seconds ago. And that is powerful. That is, again, that ripple effect, the domino effect. Organizing in spaces that this is needed, even though it's not as of a big city, is extremely important. And that's where we need to be making even more noise and showing the support, because no one knows the issues better than that community. And no one knows the solutions better than that community. And we have to meet communities where they are and say, how can I help? What can I do? And sometimes it goes back to just listening and taking what we can and giving what we can, but also not being like some sort of like savior or anything, being like, I know how to do this in your community that we haven't set foot in, but 5 minutes ago when we parked our car. I think that's really, really important.
Real quick, I'll talk from IYC. My boss, Ali Mustafa, my infamous leader, he waves at me. I have the privilege to help set up the technology for IYC Global. And so I'll speak on behalf of IYC on permission of Ali Mustafa. Again, he's my leader. We understand there's a whole world out there for our youth. So what we did for IYC, we started in New York 6 months ago. We literally built our own technology for IYC from the ground up. We didn't use Accenture. We didn't use Microsoft, because why? If you want to use their software, they charge you. And if you want to access their data, they'll charge you again, right? One thing that Ali has done, and what people don't know, is after we have our events, we have to write a comprehensive analysis, and it's get submitted to the folks at the UN, chapters and organizations, homeland yards. So information is key. Data is imperative. And when you buy a contract with these tech companies, data's not yours. We all know that. So my team volunteered to build the app from the ground up. So we knew exactly everybody was checking in from what country. We didn't look at your personal information. We just looked at demographics. And then we're able to write a comprehensive analysis of every single country and participant. Last event, we captured 174 countries. For the total year, we had 1.9 million views. So when we report back to the folks, when we barter for relationships with other agencies, we say, look, we have 174 countries, 1.9 million. We have a large following. Also, for this conference, we use the same technology, but we made it a little bit better. We had some glitch this morning because we created some new processes within it. So we're trying to figure it out. I have another engineer named Dr. Raymond Manning, found a software that does translation on the fly. So we, instead of having members sign in and paying for their own individual account, because when you use technology, you have to pay for an account. We know that end users may not have the money. So we took it upon ourselves to incur all the costs. So you guys have access to all the technology from our cost, from our perspective. So if you were to log in right now on the main page of IYC, you'll see this YouTube video, and it's translating in 24 languages at the same time. In closed caption. What technology platform gives you translation and allows you to participate online in your own native language. We did that. IYC did it. And to the point that Ali Mustafa was talking with other folks at the UN chapter saying, hey, look what we're doing. Another thing that Ali has also done is, perfect example, someone was from the Congo. In the jungles of Congo, all they had was radio waves. The person that had access to technology took that technology, took the information, and translated it in airwaves and broadcast it through the air to a remote village and had a classroom underneath a tree, and they're listening to the radio. I'm telling you, whatever we can do to use technology to broadcast your voice, because this is your voice, this is your platform. We just make it accessible for everybody. So we're having another conference in 6 months in New York in September. If anybody has any more ideas or concepts for technology, let us know. We will get on it. We'll get our engineers on it. We'll make sure that it becomes free for everyone to use to broadcast your voice through every single point of the world. Your voices are important, and we're willing to negotiate using technology at all costs possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruby. Everybody, please give a hands and everything and appreciation to Ruby, who has just done so much incredible work for making IYC possible, including the platform of which we all find ourselves using, including our online attendees. Thank you so much, and that is very, very powerful. Because I did want to, that actually leads into another question I had wanted to bring forward from one of our attendees online before taking an additional question in closing is we've been talking a lot about officials and our governments, but as Ruby was describing, we also need to hold our private companies accountable. They are also equally responsible for this climate crisis. And one of our attendees online, Ibrahim, asked a question of, aside from local officials, how can we hold private companies accountable in this movement? And Ruby had just eloquently described how we can say no to Microsoft and Google. No, we don't want to work for you. It is not as ethical. We don't want to use your platform. We'll create our own. We'll create our own that is more equitable and accessible for online attendees, and they will not have to pay for the price with their data. So again, looking at private companies, how also can we hold them accountable?
Like you said, I think Ruby highlighted it perfectly. And one of the strongest things we can do is say no, is not supporting, is boycotting, is organizing ourselves and your friends to maybe pitch in for a different software, a subscription or anything of the sorts, or using your own. Tech is also really overwhelming to me, so I'm not as knowledgeable in that aspect. But knowing that your money makes noise, and where you put your money, what you support has oh my gosh, I have no words anymore, has a grave impact. Educating yourselves on where the money is going from this corporation, and these industries, private companies, follow the money. Where are you going to be investing your own money? And maintaining that persistence, not doing it just for 1 day or 1 month, but try it for a year. Try it with your friends for 2 years, and being persistent in that aspect.
Thank you so much. And then I'm going to close with our final question for today. All right, and our final question for today for Nalleli before we close out this panel workshop. So please introduce yourself. And please
Oh, okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Velvita. I'm a gender and digital inclusion advocate from Cameroon. I have two worries, should I say. I know that when we have the conversation about climate change, maybe it's a little complex. And I heard him actually say, especially for people within the rural communities or people who don't on a regular understand what actually climate change actually means. And I was actually doing a lot of research on what's about and how this affects, different populations. And interestingly, from United Nations statistics, women and girls are the most vulnerable populations. I'm very happy that you are here to speak up. Without necessarily mentioning that, your story clearly indicates that. And interestingly, 70% of the 1.3 billion people who are living in poverty and in vulnerable communities are the most likely going to be affected, and these are women. 40% of the families and households that actually live in urban areas are run by women. And if I can say, interestingly, just last month we were concluding a project with the Tony Elumelu Foundation, which sort of helps, agricultural projects and people who are working in the green economy. And this is promoting women to actually get into these spaces. We found out from the statistics that 70%, about 50 to 70% of of the agricultural produce that the world actually makes is run by the rural women, or it's actually produced by women. So technically, but just about 10% of the land is owned by women. So the conversations around climate doesn't necessarily affect them because we're not in this decision making spaces. And so we don't see how generally, if I were a local farmer who likes to do, put tomatoes or potatoes in the back of my, my little farm, I'm contributing to the economy, but I don't necessarily know that some of these, like drought and all of the shortages that are coming our ways are affecting us. How do we include such, such women in the conversation? Because I feel like I fear that once the conversation gets really bigger, we sort of shallow or miss out, because the woman in her normal sense would be at home trying to probably take care of her family, so she's not really focusing. And I speak for the African and sub-Saharan Africa, which you mentioned, is that women in our culture, in our communities, don't necessarily sit at this conversation, so that's not something they're taking into account. So how do we tackle that? Like, what from what standpoint do we start including more women to see that the effects of climate change, not necessarily about oil, maybe just the effects of water shortage, or waste, probably waste management, is going to affect what they have as income, what they have to feed their families, and just get them to be part, to be part of the conversation. And the second part is, speaking, and I just like to take this moment to speak into the the aspect of voting. um I come from a country where our leader is going to be clocking 40 years in power, and that is really a major challenge, especially for young people, because I've not seen another president. I grew up only seeing that one. Most likely, the people of my age who probably have passed, and they've not seen what another president looks like. And we're talking about getting women to actually voice out, to be part of the voting procedures. But now, if we're just about 10% who actually have power to decide, how do we get more women to actually take decisions, like actually see that, okay, maybe I'm not voting for a president, maybe I'm voting for a local law that can sort of help women and our interests, and protect our interests, and make sure that at the end of the day, whoever is sitting either in council, whoever is sitting as governor, sort of protects the interests of my local communities and things that sort of affect me.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you for all the work that you're doing as well, in your advocacy. I think, like you mentioned, even voting for a local law or making sure that you vote down the ballot is very powerful. There's so many decisions made at a local level, not just only international or national, that affects a lot of our day-to-day lives, and that's one way that we can voice our power. You can, oh my gosh, we can use our power and voice our beliefs and our needs for our community. Again, this is why I say every oh my goodness, I can't talk anymore. I'm so sorry. That's why I say activism is different for everyone, because there's not like that one glove for an activist that fits everyone, because our communities are all so different. Every person is so different as well. And I think meeting your community where they are, seeing if there's maybe, if people aren't able to attend meetings because they're watching their kids, having a little daycare center while we have that meeting is very powerful. It's necessary, and the kids also have fun. You make little friends, and then the mothers know that their child is safe, and they can have at least that 10 minutes of talking with their community in with a clear mind. Seeing what is creating that barrier for people in your community, and creating ways and imagining ways to remove that barrier, or to even cut it down a little bit so we can hop over the barrier. Finding ways to create solutions. And this activism is very creative. It's like imaginative, because we're actively imagining a better world. We're imagining solutions. We're creating so many things in our mind, and finding how can we support each other and make sure that what you need and your, oh my gosh, that your needs are being met. How can we create change and stand in solidarity together while you have a peace of mind? And it's difficult because again, every community is so different, and it's not like a one fits all type of answer. But analyzing your community and sitting down with your community members and saying, why aren't we able to do something once a month, not even every day, not once a week, because that is a very big time commitment. Even starting with once a month meeting, it could be 10-20 minutes, but that will start. And once you ignite that little engine, it's, you can't really stop it, because you become so passionate about it, and why you're fighting, and the love that you bring your with your activism is going to keep you going in the long run.
Absolutely. It really begins with knowing your why. Everybody here has a story to tell, and neither of us can tell you how you are going to tell it. But again, knowing that why, knowing your community, knowing that one thing that you would like to change is really where it all starts. And this is the moment that I would like to say thank you so much to Nalleli Cobo. Please give her a warm round of applause. For everything that you've done and continue to do, and how you continue to mobilize and inspire the youth. Thank you to our wonderful audience here, all the future, actually now you all are change makers. You are. Thank you to you all. Let's give a round of applause for all of you. And let's give a round of applause for those joining us online from all over the world. Thank you all for being here in your different time zones. And thank you so much to the IYC team and organizers. For Ruby, thank you so much, Ruby, for making such a wonderful platform. And our founder, Ollie. No. Yes. And yes, colleagues and Ali Mustafa. I just meant the tech. Yes, the tech aspect. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. No, yes. Yes, team effort, collaborative, absolutely. I just happened to individually see you. Yes. All right, and thank you, all of you. So yes, we will now close out, and thank you all so much, and let us continue this work and these conversations. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Would it be okay if we took a photo together?
absolutely.
Yeah. No, 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 no. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, sorry.